The situation has been extremely serious. The seriousness itself is reflected by the fact that in some of our most sensitive districts, there have been clashes between communities, and the effect of those clashes are that human lives have been lost, injuries have been caused, people have been thrown out of their houses and their normal habitats. You have 400,000 people or more living in the relief camps. And from the reports which have been coming in, the situation in the relief camps is certainly not an ideal one. More particularly because these camps had to be impromptu created. The government has now said that they will have a CBI inquiry into this matter. While we sympathize with all who've lost their lives and their families, those who've lost their livelihood, their houses, I would only urge the government not to treat this case as a case where a simple crime has been committed. Obviously, if people are guilty, they must be investigated and punished. From all statements of the government and the Honorable Home Minister which have been coming, if we miss out the real issue as to why this situation has taken place, even if we tomorrow succeed in sending these people back to their villages and their homes, giving some kind of a relief to them, there is not a lurking but almost a certain doubt and an apprehension in our minds that with the kind of situation which is existing in those areas, that these incidents are likely to be repeated. And I would therefore in his response urge the Honorable Home Minister, rather than consider it only as a law and order problem, that so many people have been uprooted, so many people have been arrested, so many people have been sent back, relief is being provided to so many people. That of course is the least that the government must do. The state government had completely failed. But please go into the root cause of why this problem is taking place. And if this problem gets repeated, the consequences not only on the state of Assam but on India as a nation, our national identity, our personality, even our geography are going to be severe. Sir, I don't want to take satisfaction by saying that my party had always said so. But then the least that can be said is this not a normal and a natural consequence of the change or an unnatural change in the demography that has taken place in those regions? Demography has an impact on the economy. You take away the land which belongs to the people who are in the normal habitat in those areas. You impact on their place of work, their agriculture, their resources, and all this is accompanied by social tensions. Those who have administered this country, those who framed our laws, our constitution, were conscious of this. We are conscious of the sensitivity of the certain areas. Our tribal areas, we know it's a natural habitat of some people who can go and buy land there and settle there. We are conscious of the sensitivities of those areas. My friend from Jammu and Kashmir yesterday was speaking very vociferously. They are proud of what they call the Kashmiriyat, and they want that to be preserved. I can understand his sentiment. We may disagree on many issues, but this sentiment I don't disagree with. Northeast, therefore, is a very sensitive region for India. The land connectivity between Northeast and the rest of the country is very narrow, what we call the chicken's neck. Northeast was one of the provinces, which was one of the regions which was very badly affected because of India's partition. There was a lot of violence which took place on the western borders, where the country was partitioned. But Northeast moved some good 1200 to 1500 kilometers away by the creation of what we then called East Pakistan. And therefore, whether it is raw material or it is some food items, the traveling distance itself increased. And therefore, life was certainly not the most comfortable. It had different kinds of tribes, communities, people. And they were very sensitive to this. And this is one area where we really should not have had any political differences as to how to deal with it. So the Congress leadership at that stage, immediately on the eve of independence, and immediately upon independence, the Congress party in Assam was led by a legendary leader, Sri Gopinath Bordoloi, who is still very, very revered in that state. His name is taken with a lot of respect. He's a Bharat Ratna. What was his approach to this problem and what is your approach today? His approach was, and this is recorded, he wanted that personality of Northeast, particularly Assam, its cultural identity, its linguistic identity to be maintained. I was going through a resolution of the Assam Pradesh Congress Committee in 1945, immediately on the eve of independence. And the Pradesh Congress Committee said, unless the province of Assam is organized on basis of Assamese language and Assamese culture, the survival of Assamese nationality and culture will become impossible. Basis of Assamese language and Assamese culture, the survival of Assamese nationality and culture will become impossible. The inclusion of Bengali-speaking Sylhet and Kachar and immigration and importation of lakhs of settlers on wasteland. This is not the AGP saying this. This is what the then Congress party said this. Lord Wavell wrote that Gopinath Bordoloi wrote to Sardar Patel in 1946, 18th February. Maulana Sahib seemed to come to the conclusion that the only alternative to the state of things is to separate the Bengali districts of Sylhet and portion of Kachar from Assam and join these with Bengal, a consummation to which the Assamese people are looking forward for the last 70 years. So even when you had the reorganization of states, the Congress party leadership at that time was fully conscious of the fact, and rightly so, that because of the sensitivities of Northeast, the cultural identity, the linguistic identity of the region has to be maintained. There's nothing wrong in that. Now this would obviously include people of various religions. And that time Assam had, besides the tribals, they had the majority community, the Hindus, the Muslims, the Christians. But in terms of the cultural identity of that region, they wanted it to be preserved. Sir, unfortunately, somewhere post-independence, the line which the Congress party took in Assam and which Sri Gopinath Bordoloi had always advocated was altered by subsequent leaders of their party. They probably realized that the ethnic Assamese, the cultural Assamese vote is going away, and therefore they were in search of an alternative vote. I don't want to repeat some of the slogans which they gave because that for the search of that alternative vote bank. And that search of an alternative vote bank, the Honorable Prime Minister is here. He represents the state of Assam for the last 21 years in this house. If you ask the right questions, you will get the right answer. It was that pursuit of the alternative vote bank which is really responsible as the root cause of the problem today. And for that you wanted a change in democracy. You had an open border. People would come and settle down. And once people came and settled down, there was no way of pushing them back. Bangladesh, earlier East Pakistan and Bangladesh, was not willing to take them back. Now this design, unconsciously, not consciously, was for a vote bank politics. But this overlapped with a design which some others had. And what was the design of others across the borders? So I was quite surprised while I was reading. Mr. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto wrote a book called Myths of Independence. And I'm just quoting a sentence from that book. This is when Bangladesh had not been created. He says, and I quote, "It would be wrong that Kashmir is the only dispute that divides India and Pakistan, though undoubtedly the most significant. One at least is nearly as important as the Kashmir dispute, that of Assam and some districts of India adjacent to East Pakistan. To these, Pakistan has a good claim." This was not only the sentiment which Mr. Bhutto expressed, because he was known to be advocating a 1,000-year war against India. Pre-1971, somebody whom we regarded as a great friend of India in Bangladesh, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, in his book Eastern Pakistan, Its Population and Economics Observed, and I'm quoting from Sheikh Mujibur Rahman's book, and I quote, "Because Eastern Pakistan must have sufficient land for its expansion, and because Assam has abundant forest and mineral resources, coal, petroleum, etc., Eastern Pakistan must include Assam to be financially and economically strong." Now you on one hand had a design that some of these regions could be added to what was then East Pakistan. On the other hand, you had the vote bank interest which discarded the Gopinath Bordoloi line and which said, let us get migrants over, we are a convenient vote bank. Now unconsciously these two designs overlapped each other. And you had the most unprecedented demographic change which has taken place in the region. Have you seen the kind of demographic changes? Now kindly link it to what we call concerns of national security. Kokrajhar is Bodo population is significantly there. Adjacent to it is Dhubri. The 2001 census shows Dhubri with almost 71% population, not ethnic minority, but migrants. In 2011, when the results of the census are declared, this figure is likely to cross 80. Now, where do you have 80% illegal immigrants? Adjacent to the Bangladesh border, right next to the chicken's neck. And therefore, the kind of security threat it constitutes to India, besides being an expansion of the territory, today we have friendly relations, we hope to strengthen those friendly relations. But no countries allow encroachment into their territory by an illegal immigration in this manner. We have allowed them to do so. So a question then arises, how do we get rid of these people? How do you say all of them are foreign nationals? So I was reading in terms of jurisprudence, the most legendary and liberal name in the world, at least from our jurisprudence point of view, has been Lord Dennings. Now on the due process of law, how do you get rid of these people who are foreigners who immigrate illegally? Whether it's an American or it's a Pakistani or it's a British citizen or a Bangladeshi who comes without legitimacy and enters our territory, must be thrown out by a due process. You can't say a due process is not possible and therefore we don't throw them out. Now Lord Dennings has probably the most monumental work on the due process of law, and he is universally regarded as a global authority on the subject. Now England doesn't face these kind of threats, they only have some illegal immigration. Now a liberal like him, when he refers to England, he says, and I quote, "In recent times England has been invaded." He uses the word invaded. "Not by enemies nor by friends, but by those who seek England as a haven. In their own countries there is poverty, disease and no homes. In England there is social security, a national health service, a guaranteed housing to all to be had for the asking without payment and without working for it. Once here, each seeks to bring his relatives to join him, so they multiply exceedingly. This is speaking about a developed country. And here we are dealing with these bordering districts of Assam, which are as it is economically deprived. So you allow, because there is pressure on land in Bangladesh, there is pressure on the economy in Bangladesh, so you allow an en masse migration to take place. And the result of the en masse migration is that you have a complete demographic change in those regions, leading to social tensions. What was the government's approach, sir? And I'll make good this charge against the present government. You had a law which is there in every country, which is called the Foreigners Act. The Foreigners Act is a law by which you check the illegitimate entry of foreigners into any country. The Foreigners Act always has a provision that whenever the state feels that this man is an illegally entered foreigner, the onus of proof is on this person to show that he is a legitimate resident or a citizen. So the Foreigners Act worked very well. So every time the government of India feels that somebody, whether it's from any friendly state or unfriendly state, has wrongfully entered India or overstayed, the Foreigners Act notice is given. The onus of proof is on him to show that he has entered the country unlawfully. You should have applied the Foreigners Act. After all, you had the Assam Accord in 1985. But the government said in 1983 that this Foreigners Act will not suit Assam. The state which is most affected by illegal entry of immigrants is Assam. So you said this act will not apply. We will bring the illegal migrants determination tribunal. We'll have a tribunal who will determine. And what you did was, in that tribunal, you created a law so that you can make impossible the detection, determination and deportation of an illegal foreigner. The change which you suddenly brought about for Assam was, for the rest of the country, Foreigners Act will apply, but for Assam, the IMDT will apply, and in IMDT, the state has to prove that the man concerned is a foreigner. And when you have millions of people, how does the state prove that? So you made the functioning of that act almost next to impossible. By this provision of shifting the onus, you made OTOs the entire IMDT Act. Now this act was challenged. And my party always had a view that this act should be repealed, go back to the Foreigners Act. The Supreme Court struck down this act and said this is an act which almost encourages aggression and invasion, a silent invasion of India. And therefore this is completely unconstitutional, this act is not acceptable. So go back to the Foreigners Act and start a detection under the Foreigners Act. We thought after the Supreme Court judgment, at least the government would now learn. So what they did was went back to the Foreigners Act and framed rules under the Foreigners Act. The Foreigners Act said the onus is on the alleged foreigner to prove that he is a citizen. They said this provision will not apply to Assam. For Assam, the provision is the state will have to show that he is a foreigner. So what the court struck down in the first round, directly they brought in directly with laws. Here was a government which not only discarded the traditional Assam Congress line, the Gopinath Bordoloi line, which wanted to completely dismantle and destroy the identity of that state, which directly brought in and then indirectly brought in a provision by you could have illegal settlers in Assam. The Supreme Court considered the challenge for the second time and then again struck it down and said this is completely unconstitutional, this is not acceptable. So your rules have also been struck down as Ultra Vires the Act. We are back to a square one and you are not allowing the Foreigners Act to operate. What is the position in districts like Dhubri, Gopalpara, where you have 60, 70, today more than 80% foreigners? On the local inhabitants, there is a pressure. There is pressure on land, there is pressure on economy, there is pressure on resources. And as long as this situation continues, you can say that there are so many people in the relief camp, these cases have been registered, CBI will now investigate matters. This will be, at best, I regret to use that word, a clerical approach to resolving this problem. Fortunately, we have the benefit of Mr. Shinde, who's looking at this matter afresh as a new Home Minister. I would urge him, please reject this approach. Please go back to your present leadership. I don't know. I am getting mixed signals from your present Chief Minister from the statements I read. At times I see revival of the Gopinath Bodoloi approach. At times I see the presence of that vote bank approach. Please have a clarity of thought process as to what is the approach. And the statement, sir, we expect from you is, how did this demographic character of Assam change? Is this social tension completely related to this demographic character being changed? And merely by relief, you must give relief irrespective of who the victim is. Because even if somebody is an illegally entered foreigner, nobody has a right to kill him. He can only be sent back by a due process. So please give relief, because relief is something which is humanitarian. Increase your reliefs in the relief camps. But please address the larger issue. You can't have more than 800 kilometers of border with Bangladesh which is unfenced. There can be a problem with regard to the riverine border, but the rest of the border requires to be fenced. I understand the Honorable Prime Minister on his last visit has been to some extent concerned with that issue to Bangladesh when he recently visited them. So please, let's fence the border. Let's start this detection process. And please apply yourself to the larger issue. And the larger issue is, it is not theoretical enough to say that changed demography in any part of the region will create social tensions. It's not a hypothetical concept. It's a realistic concept. And therefore, providing immediate relief, please do it, please increase it. But then address yourself to the larger issue. If you are willing to go back to the Congress party's original stand, probably India will be safer in your hands. But if you want the vote bank stand which your party subsequently has taken in relation to Assam, I don't think that region of this country will be secure in your hand. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. One question so they can give in reply. Honorable the Home Minister, does